Hello, my name is John Socia, the father of Jeremy Socia, and I want to welcome you to the next exciting episode of the Infinite Rabbit Hole.
Imagine that this line represents time. Present 1985, future, past. Prior to this point in time, somewhere in the past, the timeline skewed into this tangent, creating an alternate 1985. Alternate you, me, and Einstein. Reality for everyone else.
On February 2nd of 1959, on the eastern side of the mountain of Kolotzikau, a brutal and mysterious event would take place that would boggle the minds of all that learn of its details for what may be forever. Kolotzikau is translated from the local native Manzi to mean lack of game, but also has a more sinister nickname given to it by the Manzi, Holachiao, or Dead Mountain. This barren and dangerous place is located in the northern Ural region of Russia, near the Komi Republic, and since this infamous event took place, the area has been much more commonly referred to simply as Dyatlov Pass. 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov and 9 others who were graduate students of the Ural Polytechnic Institute, now known as the Ural State Technical University, began their adventure from the then Soviet city of Sverdlovsk, or modern-day Yekaterinburg, to begin their expedition to Otorten Mountain. The cast were all experienced hikers and skiers, and the Class 3 route that they were about to embark on should have held no problem for the group at all in typical weather. But this was the dead of winter, and 10 days into their trip on the eastern slope of Kolotzikau, the group of 9 students would set up the last camp of their lives as a mysterious event took place that sent them fleeing from their tent into the dark and frozen Ural winter night. One of the original 10 members by the name of Yuri Yudin had turned back a few days into the expedition, a decision that would make him the only surviving member of the group. 3 weeks later, a search and rescue team dispatched to Kolotzikau discovered their tent half covered by 3 weeks of snow and ice, but initially found no signs of the hikers. A mile away in separate locations, all of the hikers were found frozen to death, half-dressed, and most of them missing their boots. A few were found face down, some were found in the fetal position, and the rest spent their last moments holding on to another. After the bodies were removed from the mountain, forensics teams would discover that only 6 were ultimately killed by hypothermia, while the other 3 died from brutal trauma, including head injuries. One woman was missing her tongue, and many of the clothing that they were wearing held abnormal amounts of radiation after being measured with a Geiger counter. Ultimately, the lead investigator, Lev Ivanov, would close the case and pen a final report stating that the hikers had perished of, quote, an unknown compelling force. This mysterious closure alone is enough to send most people who read it down a rabbit hole. But as we will soon learn, there is still much more to unravel about this event. After the death of the 9 hikers, authorities closed all Kolotzikau and its surrounding area for 3 years, and speculation of what really happened began to run wild. Welcome to Dyatlov Pass, everybody, and welcome back to Infinite Rabbit Hole.
I was gonna say, what? No intros, just go right into it. Crazy.
Yeah, I started not putting that at the end of the intros. It's a thing I'm trying.
I like when you do that because you've done this before, where you come in with the cinematic intro,
Yeah.
and then bam, credits, right, and then back into it. I like that.
Yeah,
Bam.
Yeah,
it's all
Bam.
it's all festive and stuff, pageantry, if you will.
there you go. That's the word.
Welcome back to the Infinite Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Jeremy, and today we will be diving into the subject of Dyatlov Pass. It's a doozy. It's crazy. A lot of people claim that they know what happened. A lot of people claim that they don't know what happened. Some people claim that it was a Bigfoot or a Yeti-like creature. Some people believe it was aliens. Some people think that they just went crazy and killed each other. We're
I know
going to
what
figure it
happened.
out. But anyways, I want to say that we're recording the Thanksgiving Day episode right now. So if that's true, happy Thanksgiving. Sorry, we're not very put together here.
I'm thankful.
Yeah, you are?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Are you thankful?
Well, that's the thing is on Thanksgiving now, we're going to do like a missing 411 mystery kind of thing. And I felt like Dyatlov Pass fit really into that because we're thankful to be alive, right? So we're going to learn about people who weren't alive.
I didn't say that, but yeah.
Well, that's going to be the new thing. So Halloween is going to be urban legends, and then Thanksgiving is going to be like, damn, I'm happy I'm not that person.
Rough. I'm happy I'm not freezing to death, so yeah.
Before we start going for the day, just want to let everybody know listening to this on Spotify or your other podcast player of choice that you can watch Infinite Rabbit Hole live on twitch.tv/Infinite Rabbit Hole every Sunday at 8 p.m. Central Time. And check it out. We got a brand new Patreon. That's right. Patreon.com/Infinite Rabbit Hole. Right now, we only have a $3 tier. And basically what this is that you get to listen to episodes as soon as they are edited. I will put them up. This episode will not be coming out for a whole nother month, but will be released sometime next week to all of the patrons, and they're ad-free. Soon, we'll be releasing another tier, and that's going to include a monthly bonus episode, but we have to knock out some of the details with that amongst us and see what we can get to work for us. So more details on that in the future. But yeah. And then the last thing I want to say, actually, no, let's go back to Patreon. We have a new patron, everybody. Skeeter. Thanks, Skeeter. Appreciate you, bud.
Thank you, Skeeter.
Give a big old shout out to Skeeter. We
Thanks,
met Skeeter
Skeeter.
at UFO Days this year, and that was awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much. And then the last thing is voicemails. So we're kicking back up the voicemail thing, which is something we did back halfway through our tenure. You go to infiniterabbithole.com. There's a little red microphone button at the bottom right-hand side. You record a voicemail, some sort of intro for us for the episode. Say, hey, everybody, this is so-and-so of so-and-so, or what of what, right? So if you got a podcast, or if you have a business, or if you have an Amazon page, or whatever, Etsy, I don't care. Say, hey, this is so-and-so of this, and you're listening to the Infinite Rabbit Hole. And what we're going to do is we're going to take your voicemail, we're going to plop it on the beginning of an episode, and it will always be there. It's free advertisement. All we want you to do is introduce us to the listeners. Simple as that. All right. Without further ado, Jacob.
What's up, dude?
How you doing, man?
I took a nap today because I slept terribly, and then I cut up some logs with a chainsaw. That was fun. And Whitney made fried venison with potatoes and gravy, and it was just nuts. It was so good. And then I came on here. Oh,
Nice.
you didn't mention the next tier for Patreon is going to be the $15 tier, which for $15 a month, we will dress up like your dad and tell you that we're proud of you. So
that's true. We talked about that.
Yeah.
So if you have daddy problems, that's a tier for you.
Gotcha. No, that's all I got going on.
Not yet. Maybe we're trying to work daddy problems and feet pics in there.
Yeah, well, that's the OnlyFans.
Stand by.
Yeah, feet pics. The feet pic calendar.
Hefe.
Yo,
You got your hairs cut.
what hair?
Exactly.
None
Got
anymore.
weird.
Beat you to it.
Looks good, man.
Thanks, bud.
You should polish
Appreciate it. I usually cut it like once a week or 2 weeks or something. I've just been lazy lately. You know how it is.
You know what we should do?
What?
We should, every week, Crystal should draw something on the top of your head and you not know what it is until we record. Yeah.
Sounds like a terrible idea.
I think it's a great idea. She's gonna draw a lot of dicks.
I'll do that if we could put glitter in your beard every
That's
show.
fine. I'll do it.
That's terrible. I would
I got
never do that
daughters,
to you.
man. I got
Would never
daughters.
do that to you.
They'll do it.
Jeff,
We can
does
make it
Crystal
happen.
Does Crystal rub the top of your head for luck?
Yeah,
And
man.
is it lucky?
Depends on who you are.
Well, Crystal.
Are you cute? And if you're looking at me in my eyes when you do it, you could be very lucky.
Gross.
He's gonna lean in and give you a kiss, right on the tip of your nose, right here.
I don't think he can do that. He's pretty short. It
It's
might be
his.
like kiss your throat or something.
I could reach.
Your collarbones.
I can
He's
make it
gonna
reach.
kiss your nipple.
I'll climb up
Oh,
you
not
like
my nipple. I'm married.
I'll climb up you like a
Gross.
little freaking like a little monkey, man. I'll just scurry up you.
Disgusting. All right, my mom's listening to this. Y'all are gross.
All right, you guys ready to dive into Dyatlov Pass?
Totally ready.
All right, cool. You guys have anything that you want to put out before we get going?
My brother said, my youngest brother said that it was some sort of radiation event that caused them to go crazy and kill each other.
We do dive into that.
Cool.
We do dive into that. I don't necessarily believe that that was the cause, but there is some evidence for that. Heve, you got anything Shadowban you want to put out?
Not really. Still just trying to do the thing, man. Trying to figure some stuff out. My living situation is going to change soon. I'm not moving, but I will be having some changes. So hopefully a new studio here that looks a little better.
Nice.
Next month
Nice.
or so.
Putting Crystal to work, huh? Nice.
Yeah, well, by the time people hear this, it'll probably have already happened. But the people that are watching live in a couple weeks.
Crystal, don't do anything for free.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, let's dive into this and
Let's go.
supporting information. The Yosemite Decimal System is the rating of the difficulty of specific hiking trails, runs, and climbs. The levels range from 1 to 5 and provide an instant understanding to planners about what kind of terrain they could expect and what kind of gear they may need. A Class 1 hike is very low risk and often follows a well-groomed dirt or gravel trail and would typically mean that there would be no special equipment needed in order to complete the hike. Class 2 refers to slightly more difficult paths that may not be clearly marked in some or most places. These trails may require you to use your hands to traverse certain areas, and a good pair of hiking boots or shoes are recommended. Class 3. Now this one is what the trail was rated for the Dyatlov Pass crew. Class 3 is where things begin to get a bit more dangerous. Here you will expect to use your hands on most of the trail, as you will now be passing by, through, and over large rocks and steep slopes. You still should not need any technical climbing gear, but most people will bring a rope for added safety. Class 4 is where we surpass the idea of a trail and start referring to the pathway as a climb, and the use of a rope is fairly mandatory and is recommended to also bring along a harness and belay devices. And finally, a Class 5 route is nothing but rock climbing, often up sheer walls, and requires you to bring the entirety of climbing gear, such as a rope, a harness, belay devices, climbing shoes, a helmet, and quick draws, amongst many other optional pieces of equipment. This scale is not to be confused with the 6th level Welsenbach scale. In 1926, Willow Welsenbach established the scale that would become known as the UIAA scale in 1967 after multiple adaptations. UIAA being a French acronym for International Climbing and Mountaineering Federation. At the time of the Dyatlov Pass incident, the scale was only recognized to go to grade 3 in the Soviet Union. All 10 members of this infamous expedition were classified grade 2 hikers. At grade 2, they were labeled as experienced. But after this specific expedition, the entire group would be given the grade 3 certification and required them to cover a minimum of 186 miles or 300 kilometers of ground, with over a third of them being in what clubs would define as quote-unquote challenging terrain. with a minimum duration of 16 days, with at least 8 days spent in quote-unquote uninhabitable regions, and 6 of those 8 nights spent in a tent. Author Donnie Eicher mentions that this would give them the title of Master of Sport and would grant them the capability to officially teach others. All right, so we started off nice and slow, right? We learned about the system, and we're kind of getting an idea of what kind of path we're looking at, what kind of trail they were on, where they were going, why they were doing it. So these were students at the Ural Polytechnic Institute, and they were avid hikers, class 2. So these are basically your, I wouldn't say run-of-the-mill. These are slightly more experienced than most other hikers. They're trusted to go out and do things on their own, and they wanted to get their grade 3 so that they can start instructing. So in order to do a grade 3 as part of this Wazenbach scale, you needed to complete a certain hike and needed to have certain challenges there. And you needed to record all of this to be submitted. So we'll learn a little bit more, but they had a diary, they had camera, they had all this stuff to properly record everything that they could possibly, or everything that they needed to prove that they did. Thoughts, gentlemen?
Sounds tough.
What year was this again?
Man, really?
69?
59.
59?
Yep.
Damn.
So close.
Only a decade off.
59. Okay, so they definitely weren't carrying around like some good film equipment. I mean, they probably
No.
had some. Did you say something about film equipment?
Yes.
They had a camera.
They had film.
They had a camera.
A camera.
We're going to talk about a very famous picture too, and while we talk, I will Google up some pictures to show everybody here during the conversation pieces of this episode, and try to give you guys an idea of who these people were.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
You guys ready to roll?
Yep.
Cool. So who were they? This is where I'm going to mess up a lot of the pronunciation, by the way, just so you guys know.
Use phlegm. Lots of phlegm.
Igor Dyatlov was a 23-year-old studying radio engineering at UPI. His family was almost made up entirely of engineers, and everyone that knew him would say that he, too, held more than the average intelligence. Author Donnie Eicher quotes a friend of his, Volodya Polyonov, in his book Dead Mountain, as saying his technical knowledge was encyclopedic. And another of his friends, Moisey Axelrod, as saying Dyatlov's major contribution was his amazing ultra-shortwave transmitters that were used for communications between rafts. When discussing an expedition the two were a part of in 1958. Unfortunately, during the expedition that began on January 23rd of 1959, that eventually led to his and the others' deaths, Dyatlov did not bring a shortwave radio as he was more concerned about other necessities needed for such a hike in the dead of winter. According to author Donnie Eicher, shortwave radios in 1959 were roughly 100 pounds each and had to be fabricated by hand, as there were no large-scale production or sale of them commercially. With the extreme weight of these radios at the time, it is easy to see why an expert in radio communications did not bring a radio with him on this specific expedition. Zenaida Kolmogorova was one of the 2 females in the group and was also a student studying radio engineering. She was described as a very attractive, smart, and lively tomboy. Zena, as her friends called her, was given the task of keeping a well-documented diary of the expedition. The only other female was a woman by the name of Ludmila Dubanina, or Luda for short, was only 20 years old at the time and was the youngest of the group. Luda studied construction industry economics and was described as a very serious and strong person. This was evident as described in Donnie Eicher's book Dead Mountain, where he tells of a previous trip where Luda was shot in the leg by a fellow hiker who mishandled a hunting rifle yet stayed in good spirits the entire 50-mile trip back out of the Siberia's eastern Sayan Mountains. She was given the job of treasurer of the expedition and was in charge of the security and keeping of the group's funds. Yuri Yudin, the man who had turned back early on in the expedition, was given the task of keeping and handling first aid gear. Yudin was one of 3 Yuris in the group and was a geology student with a sense of humor who had struggled constantly throughout his young life with rheumatism, which causes intermittent pain in the joints and connective tissues in your body, as well as a heart condition and chronic knee and back pain. This would ultimately be the reason for him leaving the group early. Yuri Doroshenko was also a radio engineering student with Igor and was mentioned as being very brave by his peers. Yuri Krivonoshenko, aka Georgie, studied construction and hydraulics and was considered someone that valued the arts of acting and music. Alexander Kolevatov was a very private person who studied nuclear physics and was in the best shape out of the entire group. Rustem Slobodin had already earned a degree in mechanical engineering and was the son of 2 professors at the university, Nikolai Thibault Brignoles, aka Kolya, and he too already graduated, earning his degree in industrial civil construction. A last-minute addition to the group was the much older 37-year-old Alexander Zolotaryov, or as the group would get to know him as Sasha. A friend of Dyatlov, Sasha was a local hiking instructor who Dyatlov saw as a great addition to the team. All right. So, we met everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You guys feel met?
A lot of
Yuris.
a lot of
There's
Yuris,
3.
a lot of capable people in that group that would really have no problem with problem solving. So it's kind of like getting deep into the story as far as like, you know, why they would just go crazy all of a sudden or just run off into the wilderness.
Yeah. No, it's it gets good.
Individuals.
So here we can see these are pictures of the crew. This one shows all 10 of them. Oh, now we're gonna bring up a website with this now. Cool. All right. You can see the 2 females. We'll go into a little bit more of these pictures. This is what the tent looked like right here. This is how it looked when they found it.
Mm-hmm.
Most of these pictures are of going up to that day in early February. I think it was the 1st or the 2nd. We'll get into a little bit more here in a minute. This one, I believe right here, is actually a crew. No, that might be the actual group too. But there is a picture out there of the search crew digging. Here, right here. You see this right here?
Click
There's no, not clicking.
Why?
Right, if you
right here.
click it,
You see this right? Hold on. You see this right here? This is we'll talk about a creek bed and where 3 of the bodies were found. This is how deep they were in the creek bed. This is everybody that was digging this portion up right here. We'll talk about this picture in particular. And I think we talk about this boot rock too. But there's some very interesting stuff, and we'll have plenty to talk about picture-wise throughout this presentation. What do you think, Heve?
Well, I mean, I had Crystal Google this story earlier, so I had a general idea of what this was about. And so far, I think that the given narrative is probably, probably accurate so far. Well, there's only one thing you've said, and that's the radiation. That has me questioning the given narrative. You haven't really said what the given narrative is yet. Are you just waiting for that? Or are you waiting to tell us all? Okay.
Yeah, we'll get into all that. We're going to dissect a lot of different things here.
Okay.
Today, because this is at least going to be a 2-parter. We got 16 pages. We're on page 3 right now. So I'm hoping that we can keep this to a two-parter, but I can also see this going to 3. So we'll
so
see.
far, the only thing that stands out as weird to me is radiation.
Yeah. And it'll continue to be weird.
And really, that's not even that weird. I could give you arguments of why that would be, even with the narrative. But go ahead.
All right.
Yeah, basically.
All right, so let's talk about the search. This is the portion of the search before the bodies. Mid-February was a time at the Institute that many students began returning from home for upcoming classes. This was also true for Igor Dyatlov's sister, Rufina, who was also a radio engineering student at UPI. She began getting worried a few days after Igor was meant to be back from his expedition and grew even more worried on February 16th when she attended a meeting in the administration building where nobody on staff showed any concern over their late arrival. They gave her non-reassuring responses, which outlined scenarios of the possibility of the group missing the train or someone spraining an ankle, which would have slowed the entire trip down immensely. The concern from other family members began a few days earlier on the 13th, which was the day that the Dyatlov group was scheduled to be back at the university. Many of the parents and other relatives of various members of the party phoned or went to the administration building in person to request information on their whereabouts. But to their dismay, the university repeatedly stated that there was nothing that they could do at the time and that the president of the sporting club would be back in a few days and he would be able to better answer their questions. This continued until the 17th, when the school finally sent a telegram to Vizhe, the village where the group was supposed to be traveling from, just prior to showing back up on campus. The next day, when Lev Gordo, the school's sporting club director, returned, he broke the news to families that their telegram was returned. Quote, "The Dyatlov group did not return." This kickstarted the construction of a search party and the travel of Gordo and the leader of another hiking group, Yuri Blinov, whose group had accompanied Dyatlov's group for the first leg of the trip before breaking off on their own path to Ivdel, the gateway to the northern Urals. It was then that they discovered that the route of the Dyatlov group had never been posted at the local hiking commission, which made it impossible to know where to look past the point where Dyatlov and Blinov's groups separated. The search officially began on the 20th when Blinov and Gordo are taken on board a Yak-12 surveillance plane where they searched the surrounding area until cloud coverage and winds made them turn back just prior to nightfall. On the same day, Yuri Yudin arrives back on campus and is surprised that, but not alarmed, at the news of his friends not showing up on campus yet. He explains that when he broke off from the group, they were 3 days behind schedule. At this point, they would be 6 days behind, and Yudin saw that as completely possible and was not alarmed by their tardiness. The next day, Blinov and Gordo are back in the air when they notice that the Monzi village of Batiarova, they descend to ask the tribe if they had any run-ins with Dyatlov and his team. They are pleasantly surprised to hear that the group did stop in and warmed up with tea, but they opted out of staying the night and quickly headed back on their trail and into a nearby tree line. It's not until February 25th until they finally catch a break when someone spots a skiing track made by the Osupia River where they would find evidence of a camp that the Dyatlov team could have used in the expedition. But unfortunately, the next morning, they were unable to pick up the trail again, so they decided to follow the river to the intended destination of the lost group, Otorten Mountain. It was at the top of a hill close to the mountain that search team member Mikhail Sharavin noticed a sliver of a black tent poking out through the ocean of white snow. Sharavin and his search partner Boris Slopstov began their descent towards the half-collapsed tent, which was now under the snow. The two men call out for the lost group, but they receive no answers. As they approach the still-standing south-facing entrance of the tent, they notice an axe and a dead flashlight buried in the snow. Sharavan grabs the axe and slices an opening in the tent and is surprised to find that there was nobody inside. The belongings of the Dyatlov group were left in such a way that when Boris and Mikhail began to observe the scene, it looked like the group was only gone from the tent temporarily. Clothes were neatly folded, food was ready to be eaten in the middle of the tent, and multiple pairs of boots were lined up neatly by the wall. It was only the fact that half of the tent had collapsed and the amount of time they were gone that they even questioned their safety. Among some of the other things left behind by Dyatlov and his crew were jackets, a camera, rubbing alcohol, skis, a flashlight, and, of course, the axe. But unfortunately, daylight was coming to an end, and the men began hiking back to base camp. When they arrived back at their camp, the radiogram operator sends out a message of the news of the discovery, and in response from the town of Ivdal, a request that a helipad and campsite be built for 50 people, as well as the strict order that absolutely nothing shall be touched inside that tent. Unfortunately, Boris and Mikhail had returned with some of the lost group's gear as proof of their discovery, so that order was already broken before it was made. The next day, a wave of searchers shows up, including dogs, police officers, hiking advisors, Monzi volunteers, and many others. It was about 20 yards away from the tent that the first set of footprints were found. Soon after, a total of 9 unique sets of footprints were found to be split up into 2 parallel lines, moving away from the tent and merging back together once in the valley below. The most concerning thing about the prints were that whoever had left them were not wearing any boots or shoes. These were made by bare feet. Around noon, a young man comes across what looks like charred cedar branches, partially buried under the snow under a cedar tree. After moving some of the snow away, they saw what resembles a very poorly made campfire. But just beyond that, another man calls out a ghastly discovery. He had found a human knee sticking out of the snow just to the north of the makeshift fire pit. The first 2 bodies are found lying side by side, one of which was wearing a checkered shirt and a pair of swim trunks under long underwear with only one leg of the garment still present, and bare feet. The other body was wearing an undershirt, long underwear, briefs, and socks. Both of their clothes are torn in multiple places, revealing bare frozen skin. One was face down with arms folded under his head with broken cedar branches below him. The other was on his back with his mouth and eyes partially eaten by small animals. Without hesitation, Boris and Mikhail easily recognized the man laying on his stomach as Yuri Doroshenko, and the other being the body of Georgy Krivonishenko. All right, so we found the first 2 bodies, guys. Thoughts?
It's rough.
Yeah, that sucks. Definitely sucks.
It's going to suck worse, just so you
I
know.
want to go on adventures, but I don't want to end up dead.
While you were talking, I pulled up. I'm looking at Google Earth because Google Earth is freaking awesome. Just looking at the area, dude. It's in the middle of fucking
Share it.
nowhere.
Share it with
dude.
us, bro.
Oh
Share
yeah,
it with
dude.
us.
I'll share it. I forgot I could do that, dude. The internet.
Skeeter.
Very well.
I think Jeremy's
Gets a
eyes are
haircut
getting
and
sore
loses
from
all of his
treating.
smarts.
Bro, here
Dude.
it is, right here.
Those names are hard.
Dyatlov Pass.
Yeah.
Right? And it's
Middle of
literally
nowhere.
in the middle of freaking, you can zoom out, you can see like the whole earth, and it's still in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Scroll in because at the bottom of the hill there should be a river close to that. I'm curious. I want to see how close that was. I never even thought about looking at oh yeah, there it is.
This?
Yeah. Never even thought about looking at Google Earth. That's awesome.
Yeah, and then there's all these like pictures. Yep. The thing is, like you can see it.
There's Boot Rock. Yep.
It looks barren, but then you look closer and it's like, no, those are trees, dude. It's just a wall of trees, man.
Yep.
Like who knows what the fuck is out there?
Oh yeah.
It looks cold as shit too.
Oh yeah, dude. It's in the Ural Mountains. It's fucking freezing.
They got memorials. You know what's interesting too is that even on Google Earth, it says here Dyatlov Pass, remote mountainous area. Remote mountainous area with a mystery.
Oh yeah,
Spooky.
definitely a mystery. I mean, there is the official narrative, which we'll dive into, but trust me, not all the pieces fit.
Remote and mountainous.
Mountainous.
Yeah. Mountainous.
You guys got anything else? You guys ready to move on?
Yeah, I'm ready to move on. I want to hear about these other bodies. Unfortunately,
let's go.
try to get in more of an idea of what I think happened.
More bodies. Soon after, just a few hundred yards away, another searcher, Stepan Korikov, and his German Shepherd are combing the area when the dog anxiously alerts to a possible trail leading to the tree with his arms folded. Leading to a bent over young birch tree. Here is where they find the remains of Igor Dyatlov, clutched to the tree with his arms folded across his chest as if he were holding on to the sapling for dear life. He is covered in more clothing than the other two bodies previously found, but is still without gloves, hat, or boots. Several hundred yards away from the birch, in the direction of the abandoned tent, another body is found by another man and his dog, this one female. She was found lying on her right side with her face facing downward, and her face is covered in dry blood. She is the first body found that is dressed mostly appropriately. She is wearing a hat, snow jacket, and snow pants, but like the others, she is only wearing socks. She would be later identified as Zina Kolmogorova. Shortly after the discovery of the first four bodies, another group is making progress in uncovering the part of the tent that collapsed under the snow. Here they made the discovery that on the north-facing portion of the tent, the tarp material was torn in multiple places. By the end of the day, on February 27th, the local lead prosecutor would be taken off of the case without any real reason and replaced by regional prosecutor Lev Ivanov on March 1st. Shortly after the arrival of Ivanov, the team discovers the reason for the branches stuck under the body of Yuri Doroshenko. Due to damage of the cedar tree that the first two bodies were found, it would seem that Doroshenko was in the tree and fell after a branch gave way. It is assumed that he had fallen to his death while clutching onto the branch. Another interesting piece of evidence was found during this time. There was a neatly made pile of tree limbs and sticks under a layer of snow right next to the makeshift fireplace. So the question was raised on why would someone leave the sticks there without burning them? Even though there were a few ideas floating around that seemed to be false, there was a picture starting to come together. Regional prosecutor Lev Ivanov believed that they had begun dinner and started to get dressed out of their wet and cold gear when something happened that would force them out of the tent. Unfortunately, that is all that could be painted at that time. A few days went by due to a fierce storm that came through the area before the searching could continue, and on March 4th, the team's storage structure meant to hold the portion of food and gear needed for their return trip was found by the Asupia River at the bottom of the hillside. The shelter was standing just fine with no damage. Everything seemed to be in place and showed no signs that it was looted or even visited by any of the Dyatlov party. On March 5th, the fifth body was found, just about 1,000 yards away from the tent in a yet unchecked area. This would be the remains of rustic Slobodin. Slobodin was found face down and almost fully clothed. His right leg was tucked underneath him, and one of his hands were clasped near the center of his chest. There were two very disturbing details of the scene. One, which was a small frozen valley in the packed snow where his nose and mouth were. This shows that he was quite alive and still breathing for a while after falling to his eventual death. The other detail was that the front of his head was very discolored and was typical to blunt force trauma. The new body and the tent were packed away and sent back to Ivda. But there was one more interesting detail discovered about the tears at the north end of the tent now that they were able to get a better look with all the snow removed and the lighting was better. The cuts were made very clean, as if they were made by a very sharp object. Their first thought was that it was a knife, and they found it hard to believe that the group would damage their own source of protection from the elements. But it was the further inspection by G. Shurkinya, the scientific officer placed in charge of investigating the cuts on the wall of the tent opposite the entryway, that it was proven that the cuts did not originate from within the tent. Oh, that they did originate from within the tent, not from outside. This new detail would lend to the belief that whatever happened that night, the crew were unable to exit through the front and had to cut their way out of the back instead. The cause of death for the first 4 bodies was made official on March 4th, and Rustik's body on March 11th, after thorough forensic investigations were conducted. Their findings: all 5 had passed away from hypothermia. It wasn't until May 3rd when the next piece of evidence was found, a time period that comes close to being 2 entire months. Did I say May 3rd or March 3rd? It wasn't until May 3rd when the next piece of evidence was found, a time period that comes close to being 2 entire months. A group of searchers are digging near a creek bed when they begin to find a cache of clothing. This clothing is torn and in pieces, but there is a lot of it. So much that they continued to collect articles of torn clothing for most of the day and continued the next morning. It was on the evening of the 4th that the last 4 bodies were found at the bottom of nearly 8 feet of snow, 3 of which were so badly decomposed in the creek itself that there was no way to identify them. The 4th, however, was recognizable as Luda. All of the last 4 bodies were sparsely clothed, and the clothes that they did have on were so badly torn that even if they were alive after what happened to them, they had no chance of surviving the frigid temperatures of the nighttime. 2 of the bodies that laid in the creek were holding each other, most likely as a last resort of conserving body heat. The remains were quickly gathered and transported back to Ivdal to reduce the additional amount of decay that could happen prior to a proper autopsy. The first body to be investigated would later be identified as Alexander Kolovatov, who was easily pronounced to have died by hypothermia. Next was the older man, Sasha, who surprisingly had a really bad injury to the right side of his chest. Included in the injury were 5 broken ribs and a bruise that took up most of the right side of his torso. Due to the bruising, it was determined that Sasha sustained this injury while still alive. The official statement claimed that the injuries had been inflicted by a quote-unquote large force. Kolya was next, and he too seemed to have suffered an injury by a quote-unquote large force. But in his case, the damage was done to his head. The coroner ruled that this injury had been inflicted while he was still alive due to the large amount of hemorrhaging discovered in the skull dome. Last was Luda. Her case was the most concerning, as she had sustained massive damage to her throat, as well as 9 broken ribs and a massive amount of internal hemorrhaging, mostly from her right heart ventricle. The last detail that was discovered about her injuries was that she was missing her tongue, and the coroner would provide no reason for why. Hers, as well as Sasha's and Kolya's death, were the only 3 that were determined to be by quote-unquote violent injuries. But the strangest detail of their deaths was yet to be discovered at this point. On the 8th of May, Ivanov requested that radiological tests be done on all of their organs. A week later, the tests came back to show that organs of the victims showed the radioactive substance known as potassium-40. This was actively not of any concern, as this was a normal substance found in the decomposing of various human organs. But when a test was performed on their clothing, showed the level of this particular beta particle was far over the Soviet sanitary standards, and the story of Dyatlov Pass sprung into the history books for conspiracy theorists everywhere. According to author Donnie Eicher in his book Dead Mountain, The Untold Story of the Dyatlov Pass Incident, the Soviet quote-unquote standard, or the Soviet standard, quote, standard for beta particle contamination was under 5,000 decays per minute per 23 square inches. But one particular brown sweater owned by one of the hikers was measured at almost double that at 9,900 decays per minute, with the rest of the clothing also measuring above safe standards and even exceeds the contamination found on people who work with radioactive substances. Then, as Eicher points out, you would have to think that due to the amount of time that the bodies were missing, the initial contamination must have been much higher. But unfortunately, this does not answer the cause of death, as author Donnie Eicher reached out to Dr. Christopher Strauss, associate professor of radiology at the University of Chicago Medical Center, with the original results. His claim is that although they are elevated, the lethal amount would have had to have been hundreds of times stronger to cause lethal damage. Almost immediately after the discovery of radiation on the hiker's clothing, Ivanov was given immediate orders to end the investigations into the case. The only thing left as the cause of the death for the last 4 bodies found at Dyatlov Pass was quote-unquote an unknown compelling force. All right, guys. We have found all of the bodies.
I got a couple of different theories rolling around in my head, but first off, I just want to say I need that Ritz Bits with Cheese sponsorship. So if anybody out there knows anybody, please let them know.
Jeez. I have no theories so far. Not
Yeah.
with the addition of an unsafe level of potassium 40. At first, I mean, surface level, not knowing anything about Dyatlov Pass, I was just like, this is a Bigfoot incident, all that sort of stuff. But now with this super dose of radiation in the area, I don't.
It's a tough one, man.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And that's the thing, is that the radiation obviously, well, so it seems, isn't the thing that killed them.
Mhm.
But is high levels of radiation enough to make people go crazy? You know, is that a thing? Or was that
Maybe.
just on top of all the layers of all the stuff? So blunt force traumas, falling out of trees, not wearing boots, leaving in a hurry, all this sort of stuff, ladies missing her tongue, all this craziness going on. And then on top of all of that, also there's high radiation levels.
Mhm.
I don't know whether or not this is something that for me adds to the what happened, or if it's just another thing that was there. In the same way, it's like there was snow there, right? This could have happened when there wasn't any snow and they all died these crazy, terrible deaths, but also it was snowing. So I don't know if it was like something that led up to it, or it was something that kind of just existed alongside it. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Well, the other thing that's weird besides radiation is the guy that's 1,000 yards away. He's 1,000 yards away, and what, his nose and what? His
Nose and eyes.
His
Or
nose
tongue
and
and eyes. Tongue
His
and eyes.
tongue-
Soft tissue. Soft tissue.
The
But they said that was from
he's
small animals, right?
the fact
Yeah.
that he's 1,000 yards away tells me like something happened. Like, okay, so
Hey, can I stop you for just a second?
yeah,
I must not have included it, but those 4 bodies that we just discovered in the creek bed, little over a mile away.
holy shit.
Yeah.
Okay, so something traumatic happened. I first thought it was like a bear or something, right? Because you got guys with broken ribs and
Mhm.
and all of this, but it doesn't really make sense because they'd be eaten by the bear, right? Or you'd have a dead bear around,
Yep.
one or the other. But then you know, it could be something else. It could be like a moose or something. I don't know what kind of animals, big animals, live out in Russia, but they could have got trampled by something,
Sure.
right? And then homie walks 1,000 yards in this direction, dies.
Mhm.
These other 3, 4 people, whatever, they go the other whatever direction they went in. I lost track of all these details, but I don't know what direction everybody went in. But
Yeah, it's a lot, man. It's a lot. I mean, it's tough because there's 10 hikers altogether, right? There's 10 when you include Yuri Yudin, who's the guy that turned back. Nine bodies, and to track all their stories is a lot. I want to say that I go over it one more time, but a little bit more in depth and break it down a little bit. I do want to talk real quick about what Skeeter just put in the chat. An avalanche. Now, that is one of the biggest theories. But, Jeff, if you remember one of the photos that you just showed us of the green hill, that's Kolotsikal. It's not steep enough for an avalanche. And it's been proven that in order to have an avalanche, there's this equation that you have to have, right? You have the density of snow, loose pack. You have to have loose pack snow with heavy pack snow on top of it. And then on top of that, there also needs to be a certain degree angle for it to actually build up the momentum to create an avalanche. Now, if there was an avalanche up there, they say it would only slide about 5 feet at most.
That, and then also the tent wasn't buried.
Correct.
Right.
It was
Four of the bodies were in the creek, but the rest of them weren't. Right.
Right. So, you would think that tent would be scattered all over the side of Kolotsikal. It would just be fucking everywhere, and there wouldn't be the stove and dinnerware and everything set up nice and neat in the middle of the tent. It just wouldn't be that way.
Right.
Now, yes, there was snow piled up on the north face of it. So yeah, wind blowing and everything probably caught that side and built up drafts. You got to understand that by the time they found it, you're looking at almost a month after this whole thing happened in the middle of the Ural Mountains. This is high wind, cold, snowing all the time. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of snow that built up on at least one of the sides. What you got, Jeff?
What
Sorry,
I think
man,
is
I cut you
more
off.
likely. What I think is more likely than like an avalanche, obviously, it doesn't seem likely. There's a lot of trees, right? Like I was showing those pictures earlier from Google Earth. Like it's just a blanket of trees. So, it's possible to me that some of the canopy, the tree canopy, was just holding enough snow up there, and maybe they just fucked up, man. They put camp right where it shouldn't have been, and maybe a whole bunch of this snow came down and with some branches, right? And just bam, fucked a bunch of them up.
Let me say, man, in every single theory of what could possibly happen, and we go through a lot of them, and I'm telling you, most of my research into this event didn't come from books. It came from textbooks, because I still have access to my old college online library, and I was able to find stuff on. I'm not going to put it all out there now, but once we get to the second half of this presentation, when we start getting into the possibilities, you'll see I did a lot of fucking research, man. A lot of fucking research. And you can basically check off every single theory as not fitting perfectly. It's crazy. It's absolutely nuts. So, you guys ready to move on? We got 2 more sections for tonight. We're going to go a little over halfway. That leaves us with a lot more talking time at the end of next week's episode. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. Interviews. Igor Dyatlov's youngest sister, Tatiana, sat down with author Donnie Eicher while he was in Yekaterinburg, following information and the path that the Dyatlov group hiked in 2010, and added a few very interesting details to the story. She mentions that when she attended her brother's funeral as a young woman, she was shocked at 2 specific details of Igor's body. His skin was very dark and aged, and his hair was white. Igor was only 23 years old at the time of his death, and his hair looked as if he were an elderly man. In 2012, Eicher once again flew to Russia to continue his research into the Dyatlov incident. This time, the man who he was staying with, which happened to be Yuri Kutsenovich, head of the Yekaterinburg-based Dyatlov Foundation, had another guest, Yuri Yudin, the one survivor of the group who left early due to health issues. When asked by Eicher what he believed happened to his friends, Yudin replied first with what he thought did not happen to them. Quote, "Much has been made of the hikers' relationships with the opposite sex. That somehow arguments with the girls led to their deaths. This," he said, "is bullshit." Yudin goes on to explain that it was his opinion that they were killed by someone. He didn't know if it was because they saw something they weren't supposed to, or if they were just the target of a bad person or people. His strongest piece of evidence was Luda's missing tongue. Yudin explains that the official statement regarding her missing tongue and Georgie's eyes and mouth missing pieces was that they were gnawed at by small animals like mice and birds. But if that was the case, then why did it not happen to everyone? Luda was a very strong and outspoken woman who would not have stood down in the face of danger. This Yudin believes may have gotten her tongue cut out by someone who was trying to silence her. It is his belief that they were surprised to be approached by a person or a group of people and forced down the hill and shot and left for dead. He points to other pieces of evidence, such as the missing chocolate that the group had brought with them and a stuffed toy hedgehog that Luda had always brought with her on every expedition, as additional proof for his theory. He believed that it was possible that the killers may have stolen a few things from the tent before leaving the area. Eicher mentions in his book, just after his second interview with Yudin, that he was a bit disappointed in Yudin's theory. Luda's stuffed animal had been found in the tent that day when the searchers approached, and there was no evidence that her tongue was cut out either. The tear was not a clean cut. Yudin's theory aligned perfectly with what he believed to be the narrative pushed by the authorities and many other conspiracies that have arisen in the wake of this incident. After the first 5 bodies were found and families were notified, it became a nightmare for them to gain possession of their loved ones in order to give them a proper funeral. Originally, they were told that they could not bury their remains in their hometowns. Instead, they were to have small funerals there in Ivdal. Yudin explained that this threw up red flags for the families of the deceased. They didn't understand why this would be such a problem to have their children or siblings sent back to their homes for burial. After a few days of back-to-back arguments, the authorities finally conceded to having their funeral in Sverdlovsk, where the university was, where they all began their journey. But the stipulation is that they would be given only 2 services. Not one big one or separate smaller ones. Rather, they would only have 2. And the reason for this that was given to the families was so that they could keep the services small and not have large turnouts. Yudin explained that the intention of the authorities was to, quote, to pretend that nothing happened. Yuri Kuntsevich was the host of author Donnie Eicher during his own journey to Russia and the site of the Dyatlov Pass incident, and he was 12 when the funeral for the first 4 students took place just outside of his living room window. He explains that he had seen multiple Soviet police and men who would later be thought of as undercover KGB there watching the people attending the funeral instead of watching the proceedings. He also explained that he believed there to be thousands of people there, even though the wishes of the authorities were to keep the services small. All right.
My mom says that maybe they turned on each other or one was a plant.
That is also a common theory. There's so many freaking theories.
So I wouldn't put it past, obviously we're talking Russia and we're talking 59, right? So anything's possible as far as like, would the government do or test something on these people? Yes, absolutely. Especially the Russian government in 1959, right? Let's be real.
Yeah.
Like if they got some kind of whatever they're doing, I don't know, because obviously they didn't set a nuke off over there, but
so something that might go along with what you're about to say might get your brain ticking a little bit more. This was also very close to the time when Germany and Russia were having their big conflict right before the Cold War. And if you look at the map of Russia, the Ural Mountains are not in like where St. Petersburg is, right? It's not in like the area of Russia where most of the population lives. This is very, very, very rural, and it's fairly close to Germany. So it is actually documented that most of the artillery and weaponry that they used during conflicts such as World War II, the conflict with Germany, and Cold War, a lot of their stuff was moved to the Ural Mountains.
Yeah, see, that's one thing. Number two is I just kind of looked up, I Googled Dyatlov Pass, and through the images I found, there's actually a lot of these different charts. Looks like they've done a whole bunch of, like, let's call it signs, right?
Oh, yeah.
On how this avalanche could have happened, right? So it's not out of the question. Because when you said earlier, like, hey, it's like probably not the case, and I was looking at the Google Earth pictures, I was like, yeah, probably not. But you don't get a perspective of what the angles are. But when you look at this, you kind of see, okay, there are spots where there is some steep terrain,
yeah,
right?
But it's not enough. What I'm like that
Sure.
the slope, like that's only right where the tent is.
What was
right?
that thing called earlier that you told me? It was a certain type of avalanche. Slab avalanche.
Where the top gives out.
Yeah,
is that what you're talking about?
Just like this chunk
The
here.
top layer.
Right.
Where the blue stuff is, all the hardened ice and everything.
Right.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, is that going to cause them to go a mile away or even 1,000 yards away? I don't know.
But with severe injuries, it might cause them to try to hike out to get help, right?
Yeah, true. Could
but
potentially happen.
It does not explain the radiation, and the tongue being missing could still happen from the slab avalanche, right? You bite your own tongue off, so.
But even if it was an avalanche, man, that tent's not there. I mean, if it was a slab
avalanche, the ice could have melted.
I mean, it could have melted, but there would have been more damage to the tent. You know, that stuff's hard. That stuff, you know, they said the only real damage to it was cuts made from the inside of the tent. And if that thing's hit with hard ice, man, I don't know.
Sure, well, maybe, but like if these pictures here are legit,
yes,
right?
that is legit. Yep.
If this is legit, I mean that's a pretty fucked up tent, man.
Mm-hmm. But if it was, I'm just saying, man. Look at the hill. Look at the hill. Okay.
We're not looking behind. Like this camera's not looking. No, it's only looking in one direction, right? Like,
I know.
We don't see.
I'm trying not to skip forward here, but I mean, there's so many pictures. Like you can look up, like you have, you can see 360 views of this spot. You can see everything. I mean, there's been so many
on Google Earth. Yeah, that's how
there's so many things that were done, so many experiments, so many trials run here, so many different universities that try to put their own thoughts and ideas out there, but other universities will come out and say, no, actually it can't happen, and this is why, and then they'll prove it with mathematics or a real life example. A lot of them are static, but still, it's nuts, man. And honestly, when we get further into it, I think you're going to look at an avalanche as one of the least likely possibilities.
Keter says, plus, why didn't the tent move from the avalanche?
Yeah, I mean...
Well, maybe it wasn't huge. I mean, ice is heavy, right? And if just a big enough piece, and I mean, think about it, if they're all crammed in this tent like sardines, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, just a chunk that's a couple 100 pounds. I mean, I'm not even talking about like a fucking avalanche. I'm talking about just a chunk slides down and bam, right through the tent and just crushes this guy's ribs, fucks this guy's head up, right? This lady bites her own tongue off, right? It's a whole thing. And that,
Yeah. But then you have two other people that are trying to start a fire. One person that's climbing a tree. They don't have any clothes on. I don't know, man.
you're right.
It just,
You're right. I was just targeting
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
avalanche
how dare
thing
you?
by
How dare
itself.
you speculate, Jeff?
All I'm
You're
saying
so
what
is
an
wrong.
asshole. You're a fucking
Yeah.
asshole, Jeff.
the
You're fired.
initial debunking of the avalanche, saying, "Hey, look, it couldn't have happened because of the slope." Not necessarily true.
It couldn't do the damage. It couldn't do.
It couldn't do all the things. I get
It
that.
can't. The outcome of the situation, the outcome of the event, could not have happened by an avalanche, or at least only an avalanche.
14 the Wind says, or is it?
Yeah.
14 the Wind says, government testing was inhumane and prevalent. It wouldn't be surprising for them to cover up evidence. And
Oh, yeah.
Russia. And in
Oh, yeah.
Russia
Oh,
in
yeah.
59. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get
I don't
into
even
that
know
too.
I don't even know if they had paperwork that had anything to do with it. You know what I mean? Back then
Yeah.
over there.
Yeah. Oh, they're.
They didn't give a shit.
I think there definitely could have been some weird shit going on with the government. I do. You guys ready?
Ready.
All right, last section of the night, we're going to talk about the expedition. The Dyatlov group left the Ural Polytechnic Institute on January 23rd, 1959, and arrived in Vizhay on the 25th after 2 days of traveling by train and bus. The entire trip to Vizhay, Dyatlov and his group were accompanied by Yuri Blinov, who would eventually become a devoted member of the search party and his crew. The afternoon of the 25th would be the last time either group saw each other, and from here, they began to go their separate ways. The truck leaving towards their ultimate destination of Sector 41 would be leaving the next afternoon. So the group took the time they had been given to find a place to sleep, eat, and then talk with the local forester for information about their path to Otorten Mountain. Ivan Rempel, Vizhay's local forester, warned the group of such a trip in the dead of winter. Quote, I expressed my opinion that it is dangerous to go over the Ural Ridge in winter as there are large ravines and pits where one can sink, and winds are so strong that people can be blown away. This, of course, did nothing to change the minds of Igor Dyatlov and his crew, so they pushed on and boarded the truck to Sector 41. During the 3-hour ride in the bed of the uncovered truck in February, Yuri Yudin's rheumatism began to get unbearable, and the decision to split with the group was fast approaching. When the team arrived in Sector 41, it was made perfectly clear that the men who were referred to in Eicher's book, Dead Mountain, as woodcutters. With some research, I found that woodcutters were collectors and organizers of the frigid area's fuel, such as wood. Unlike lumberjacks who cut trees down, it would seem that woodcutters mostly gathered fallen trees or branches from the ground and stored them for use later. These woodcutters were entirely made up of men and would spend multiple months away from their families to be in or around Sector 41, which was nothing more than log buildings without the company of any females. So when the group arrived with 2 women, they instantly became very popular. This did not become a problem while they were staying overnight at Sector 41, and the next day they were ready to begin the journey to their next destination, an unnamed and abandoned geologic settlement. Their mode of transportation was to ski behind a man who was enlisted to drag their bags on a sled while riding horseback. This man was Lithuanian, who would later be found to have been a former convict who had spent 6 years in a prison in Sector 2. What it was that he did to be imprisoned is unclear even to this day, but the group seemed to like him, as they eventually branded him with the nickname of Grandpa Slava. The group and Grandpa Slava made the 15-mile trek to the abandoned settlement just fine under the cover of moonlight and found a suitable cabin to spend the night. The next morning, Yuri Yudin's pain would be too much for him to continue, especially since this was the last time he had a way back to civilization before the team headed out into the frozen wilderness. So Yudin hitched a ride back to Sector 41 with Grandpa Slava with the comfort of being able to see his friends again in 10 days when they were due to return. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. From this point on, the expedition would be done without any living person able to tell of their path and events. The only thing for anyone to go off of was the diary that was kept by Zenaida Kolmogorova and the pictures in their cameras. But we do know their intended path that they wanted to take to the base of Otorten Mountain. They were to leave the abandoned settlement and head directly to the Lozva River, where they would follow the water until they came to the point that the Lozva joined the Aspuya River, where they would then follow the shores of the Aspuya until they reached the base of the Otorten, which the Aspuya passed directly by. In the diary, there lay mention of the negative 13-degree temperatures during the day, the pathway that they were following being made by Manzi, as well as painted trees which stood as info from the Manzi. There was also mention of a disagreement between Luda and Kolya over who should stitch holes in the tent. Author Donnie Eicher mentions that the group would typically make their diary entries in the morning hours before they started hiking for the day. Igor's diary entry on the morning of January 31st stated concern about the increased wind speed and the amount of snow that was blowing off of the treetops. But the last entries were made on the night of January 31st, which would have them making their final camp on the eastern slope of what we now know as Dyatlov's Pass on February 1st, and the incident taking place on the same night or in the early hours of February 2nd. Igor Dyatlov's final diary entry on January 31st read, quote, "It's hard to imagine such a cozy place anywhere at the ridge. Under the piercing howls of the wind and hundreds of kilometers from any settlements." From this final entry, the only thing left were two pictures from that day of February 1st, which depicted the group slowly skiing along single file through blinding snow. The team would never reach Otorten Mountain and would never see the sunrise on February 2nd of 1959. Now, I do want to share the screen real quick here, because this picture right here, where is it? Right there. This picture right here is one of the final two pictures ever taken by the group. The very last picture we will talk about on the next episode, and is thought to be a major clue in what could have potentially happened, or at least a major clue in one of the theories. But yeah,
I don't know, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know either, man. I could sit here and ramble for 45 minutes about 1,000 different theories, but you're just going to tell me that, oh, wait, there's something else that you don't know yet. So,
Yep. Aliens.
True. That's a theory.
Yeah, I know. It's all theories.
It's a theory, and it's actually the theory that's tied to the last picture.
You're not going to show us the last picture yet, are you?
You want me to try? I could try to find it.
Yeah, find it.
If I can't find it, I can definitely find it in the book. I know it's in here, and I'll just show the camera.
Radioactive demon.
By the way, if anybody wants to read a really good book on this, I've read 4 books on this, and this one right here, Dead Mountain by Donnie Eicher, is a phenomenal book.
What if the most, by like just the shittiest chances, right? The shittiest, most astronomical chances you could possibly imagine. This crew of people got hit by a meteorite.
It is also a theory. I don't think it's a theory that I really dive into, but I have read that as a possibility.
Or like, what if a chunk just big enough got through the atmosphere, maybe even an air bursted, I don't know, but it got close enough to where the actual either impact, well, I don't know, just, it fucked them up. Air burst or impact. Just enough to break some ribs and make them all fucking.
I mean, it wouldn't be that crazy. They did have that massive meteorite that came in, captured by tons of dash cams, and blew through like a building or something like that a few years back.
What month? What month was their expedition?
January?
End of January, beginning of February.
Is that during like the Taurid meteor shower? Well, probably not.
All right.
I don't think it is.
Here,
Who knows, man?
here is the final picture. And I mean, it's not going to look like much to you guys, but
That's what she said.
there.
December 13th is a Taurid meteor shower.
December 13th. That's the so we're passing through that whole field of debris during that time. So it could have
Definitely
been
aliens.
Could have been a piece of space debris.
What's this stuff right here? These pictures next to it. Is that a Bigfoot? Is that a Yeti?
Yeah, I don't really know too much about that. It pops up, but it's supposed to be a Manzi, like a one of the tribe members of the Manzi tribe. A lot of people will try to spin that photograph to be a Yeti and whatnot.
click on
But if
it.
Right click it and go to open image in new tab. That way you don't have to click on the link.
well, it comes out too small. Hold on, let me try this one. Yeah, they're coming out too small for me, homie.
Well, just click it so it goes into the thumbnail portion where this other one is.
There you go.
There you go.
But you see, even it's not big. Whatever it is, it's just not big.
Could be
Yeah, I
small,
mean,
Big, right?
small Yeti.
I mean,
Yeah, maybe
it could.
maybe the Yeti in that region is small because it's fucking Russia and it's cold as shit.
The only thing, I mean, like I said, man, I read 4 books on this fucking thing, and the only thing that I could find about that picture, they mentioned it in 3 of the 4 books, was that it was a Manzi tribes member, and that in one of the books it specifically calls out how what do you use? Amateur investigators will try to spin it to be a Yeti. But if you look at it compared to the size of the tree, it's not that big. You look at the V where its dick is, it's not that big, or whatever. You can clearly see a jacket on it. Is another one.
Maybe the Yetis wear jackets. They're
Maybe
small.
they do.
Wear jackets.
Maybe they do. But
Peter
they're
says
more
radiation stunted
sophisticated.
growth.
Maybe this is why we can never find. Maybe they're actually just sophisticated. Maybe the Neanderthals never actually went extinct. Maybe they just branched off and they're also running around with jackets and shit and they're just smart. Just smarter than us.
Maybe.
Harry.
Maybe.
They're like, fuck these guys.
Maybe. We'll never know. Maybe we will know. Maybe we won't. Maybe we won't. Maybe we will. Maybe we will. Maybe we won't.
Maybe they ate some psychedelic mold or something on their food.
Maybe. It's a theory.
Fortune
Everything's a
Wind
theory.
says, definitely looks like Bigfoot. And what's the other half torso lady in the bathing suit in the snow?
Okay, so I can answer that actually. A lot of hikers, at least back then, used to wear bathing suits underneath their clothing, and then on top of other layers because it repelled water. So it helped dissipate the moisture coming off their skin and the moisture from getting from their outer layer to their inner layer. It wasn't necessarily that they were going swimming or anything like that. It was just a common practice to wear some sort of swim material underneath your clothing on top of a thin clothing as the base layer.
Skeeter says, I think it will never be solved, not until time travel happens. I don't know, Skeeter, even if time travel happened, I'm not going to some place where it's negative 13 in the sunshine.
Maybe
Just to see what happened to 10 hikers.
Maybe that's what killed them. Maybe somebody went back in time to find out what happened, and them going back in time, the radiation killed these people, and then the whole thing happened, and it's just caught.
Is that in your theories, Jeremy?
Nope.
There it is. That's the thing that happened.
That's the one.
That's,
That's the one, everybody. It was the Men in Black. Yeah. They saw an alien spacecraft and they came back in time and they're like, no.
it was the Yetis in black.
The Yetis in black. Love it. Love it.
We're
All
gonna
right.
add new theories to this thing.
We're one of those amateur investigators that they're talking about.
Skeeter says, "That's it. I solved it. Time traveling accident." See, Jeff and I think the same. 14 the Wind says, "Yep, weirdness."
Easy.
It was
Easy
Igor
peasy.
Dyatlov's like great grandson who came back to say hi to his grandfather at his greatest achievement and killed him.
Oops.
Easy.
Shit.
Easy money.
Grandfather paradox kicked in.
Yep. Big oof.
All right. You guys got anything to put out before we sound off?
Yeah, if I could get also on top of my Ritz Bits with Cheese sponsorship, my Dorito Cool Ranch sponsorship, that'd be great.
Ooh, I would like a Reese's sponsorship.
Ooh, that too.
It's Reese's.
Reese's. All right. Well, that has been another episode of the Infinite Rabbit Hole podcast. Join us next Sunday when we dive into part 2. Well, if you're not live, then you will be hearing this on a random Tuesday, probably the first Tuesday in December. But if you are watching live, thank you for stopping in. We really do appreciate the support. And until next time, travelers, we'll see you right here in the next fork in the path of the Infinite Rabbit Hole. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking out the Infinite Rabbit Hole podcast. If you're looking for more of our stuff, head on over to infiniterabbithole.com, where you can find links to all the podcast players that we are available on, and even our video platforms such as TikTok and YouTube. While you're there, make sure to check out all the links for our socials and hit that follow so you know when all the new stuff from our podcast comes out. And until next time, travelers, we'll see you right here in the next fork in the path of the Infinite Rabbit Hole. Goodbye.